repeatedly to my father.
All right, so just the announcement that I just started the recording before I forget. So. Martha, what do you think? Do you think we want to go ahead and get started?
Who do we have on the phone?
I think that's Kitty from the sacristy.
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay.
I assume so too. I just don't have her number in front of me. Okay. So I will turn this over to Dee. I have already welcomed people, but I will welcome you again. The reason that we are here is to get a better understanding of donation and receiving organs, because we have somebody near and dear to us right now who needs an organ. This is not Koreans, but here we are. Joining us today, in addition to Jackie, is Rebecca Beret, an old friend of mine, and old in terms of we've known each other since we were much younger. And she has invited Mike and Norma Bartley, both of whom have been involved in organ donation and receiving. So I will turn it over to Dee, who will introduce Andrew, who's our other guest.
All right. And so Andrew is the multicultural community outreach. Did I get that title right, Andrew? How about you introduce yourself, actually? That'll be easiest.
No problem. So yes, my name is Andrew Jones. You all can call me AJ. I am a multicultural outreach coordinator with New England Donor Services. And New England Donor Services is also formerly known as New England Organ Bank. And as a multicultural outreach coordinator, I work with the rest of my colleagues in the community outreach department to provide outreach and education, and of course, to demystify a lot of myths surrounding the topic of organ and tissue donation. So our main focus is here in Connecticut, because Connecticut actually sits at the lower part of registered donors for organ and tissue donation. So we have a lot of, we focus our areas in places like Hartford, Bridgeport, along the shoreline, and really a lot of communities that are home to many people of color. And so we want to allow everybody to understand not just what organ and tissue donation is, but how it's affecting people in different parts of the region, specifically Connecticut. I'm also a 5-year heart transplant recipient. I really became attached to this. One of the funny things about my story is how I would say that I would never go towards the med field. That was something I said in high school when we were graduating. I said, I'll never find anything in the med field for me. All my friends will, but, it just so turns out that I'm now in the med field and I absolutely love it. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, I'll turn it back over to Reverend Littlebage.
All right, thank you. So I think the way we'll kind of go is we'll just hear from Jackie, and then Rebecca, and then Mike and Norma. And then after we hear kind of those personal testimonies, if there are particular questions that people come with for Andrew, we'll start with those, and then Andrew can give us other kind of general information if there aren't specific questions. How does that sound for folks?
Good.
Great.
All right. And just so you all know, when you signed in, you should have been notified, but that we are recording this so that folks who can't join can watch it later. So yeah, Jackie, go ahead.
Hi, good morning again. It's not even morning anymore, right? So good afternoon, everyone. So I think I have a funny sort of way about how I ended up on this journey, in that for quite some time, my family, I should say, on both sides of my family, my mother's side and my father's side, we have diabetes very strong as a presence in our family. And so in my 30s, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And it was a soft diagnosis. And what I mean by that is my doctor at the time, my primary care physician, she just said, your numbers run a little high with regards to your glucose. levels. Let's put you on a tablet that will help bring your numbers down a bit, make them more manageable. And so I didn't hear that as you have diabetes. I just heard that as just take this pill once a day and you'll be fine. And so I carried on that way for many, many years, even though my numbers never really became controlled with just that tablet. And so when I was in my 40s, I switched primary care physicians, and my new physician said, "How long have you had diabetes?" And I said, I couldn't really say when I actually was diagnosed. And so she said, "Well, you've gone for quite a period of time with uncontrolled blood sugars, and we're going to need to figure out the right medications to have you on to get it in control, because here are the things that can happen if you continue to have uncontrolled blood sugar." And that's the only thing I had at the time. I didn't have high blood pressure or cholesterol or any other kinds of health issues. And so she gave me, all the information I needed, and I just filed it. I didn't really embrace the information. I just said, okay, that's nice to know. And I'm going to go on about my life. I don't feel bad. I don't have any pain. I have no visual complications of having diabetes, and we'll figure out what the right medications need to be. So fast forward to my 50s. I turned 50 and literally maybe, I turned 50 about a year later. I had this chronic cough that suggested, I thought perhaps I have walking pneumonia or something, because all I really had was the cough and exhaustion. I couldn't walk from a car parking space to the door. It would, I would need a break for that short walk. And so it was the fall of 2019 when I was actually going on a business trip, and I thought, you know what, let me just go see if I can get a script for this cough, because I can't be coughing throughout this trip. And so I went to urgent care. They took a chest x-ray. They said, we see something, but we're not really sure what it is. We think you should go to the emergency room and have a real full evaluation. So Mark took me to the emergency room. They admitted me, and I was there for 3 days. They ran every test known to man. My blood count was so low, I had to have 2 transfusions while I was there. And at the end of my stay, they said, your kidney functions your kidneys are not functioning, essentially, and you need to have a specialist, a nephrologist, follow you, and let's figure out what's going on from that end. So when I left that emergency room stint, I did not go on the business trip. I connected with a nephrologist who continued to run some tests and then determined this is not a reaction to an injury where your kidney functions can be quirky for a moment. This is a chronic issue that you have, and we're going to have to follow you to see if we can get it to a point where it just sort of stabilizes. And so that's what we tried for about 6-7 months, and I stabilized a little bit, but then it dropped again. I needed another transfusion. It was just, Jackie, your numbers are not going the other way. Your numbers are they're becoming worse and worse. And so through this, I did not have a cough anymore. I still feel fine. My energy was back, the whole 9. And so in the fall of 2021, we realized my numbers really were not ever going to turn to a point that we could say, we'll just keep you stable. It became so low that he was trying to figure out when to start me on dialysis. And he said, you need to get on the kidney transplant list, and we need for you to look for a living donor. So again, all of this is shared with me, and I'm like, okay, I feel fine. I don't understand why I need to be on a kidney donor list. And then when he said, you need to find a living donor, in my mind, I was like, well, let's do the list first and we'll just see how that goes. I'm not sure that I'm prepared to run around asking people to consider being a donor for me. And so that was fall of 2021. January of 2022, when I went for a follow-up, he said, okay, you need to understand you will die if you do not start to tell people what is going on, and you'd be surprised. You just need to get the word out. And in my mind, I thought, I don't know how I do that. I was never, even when I was in high school, college, etc., I never took a job that involved sales. I'm not good at, approaching people and asking for something. I'm very good at, if you ask me, I'll just buy all the tickets and donate them or whatever, but I'm not good at going up to people and trying to sell something, much less something so personal. So I had delayed to the point that my nephrologist just, he really he lit me up and just said, you've got to do this. This is not something that you need to be shy about, and come up with, have your family and friends help you get the word out. Maybe they could be your spokesperson around this need. And so that's what I did. I connected with a close circle of friends, and they said, you know what, Jackie, we've got this. We're going to figure this out. We're going to do a campaign for you. We will find you a kidney. Don't even worry about it. And literally from the day that I talked to my core group of friends, I did a Zoom call much like this. They took it upon themselves to figure out a campaign, figure out a social media strategy, got me an interview on the news. They have been consistently coming up with ways to get the word out. They themselves have gotten tested or have begun the evaluation process. And I remain very hopeful. I feel very positive, very confident. And I just feel like, when God will determine the time, the place, and the who, and it's going to happen, and I'm not going to worry about it. So I am taking my health seriously, in the sense that I'm doing all the things that I've been instructed to do. I passed all the evaluation steps with, flying colors to be put on the transplant list. So I'm really confident that this will be a wonderful testimony a year out from now, at least. So I think that's my full story.
Thanks,
Unless there are
Jackie.
questions.
So are there any questions for Jackie? I guess we can do question, Jeff, for each one. Leslie, you're muted.
I have one
So
question.
Jackie, when you were taking the pill,
Mm-hmm.
the pill have some effect on damaging your kidney, the diabetes pill that you were taking?
So, okay, so I was taking the pill, but I wasn't consistent in taking it. So one of the things is to be consistent in your healthcare plan, right? And so this pill I was supposed to take like let's say every day, twice a day. And I would take it today, in the morning, Monday, both times, skip until Thursday. Like I would just take it whenever and didn't really keep. So it's very possible that, yes, the inconsistency in really taking care of my health issue just made things snowball.
Okay.
Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, more clarification, because I think I heard this earlier. Jackie, how long have you been waiting for a kidney?
I officially was put on the list in October, this past October 2021.
Okay.
But I didn't tell anybody until February. So
Go ahead, Roy. You had a question, and then we'll hear from Rebecca.
Is it Roy?
Wait, Roy, you're muted.
Okay. Jackie,
yes,
have they told you that your kidneys were affected by your diabetes?
yes, yes.
Okay. And so nobody really, as far as you understood, nobody really clearly said you have diabetes and you must follow this protocol. Nobody said that early.
Not early, but my second primary care physician is the one who said, listen, this is what's going on with you, and this is what we need to do to get you stabilized.
Thanks.
All right, Rebecca, we're happy to have you with us and to hear your story.
Good to be here. So I think, Jackie, that the end of your story really is the perfect segue to the beginning of mine, which is I have, as probably many of you do, a kind of a love-hate relationship with Facebook. And probably about mid-year 2015, I was scrolling, and a childhood friend of mine with whom I hadn't been in touch really at all had reposted a post from her daughter who said, look, my dad was just diagnosed with advanced kidney disease. He needs a kidney. I'm just putting it out there. If you have O positive blood and are willing to consider it, let me know. And having a really, really faulty memory, I thought that I was on a list to be a kidney donor, and it was actually bone marrow, but bone marrow, kidney, what's the difference? And I thought to myself, well, if I'd be willing to donate a kidney to a total stranger, why wouldn't I donate a kidney to my childhood friend's ex-husband? So I responded and, got the ball rolling. And Mike, I'm sure you can underscore this. The process is really long. There's an incredible amount of testing, and that is really almost all. I mean, part of it is to make sure that you are healthy and can successfully make the donation. But I think it's predominantly about protecting the donor to make sure that there is not going to be any adverse effect on the person making the donation. And throughout all of that, I was consistently told, if there is anything at all, we will pull the plug. And if you, for any reason at all, want to back out, even on the day of donation, if you just get cold feet, we'll make up an excuse. So, I mean, as the prospective donor, I think it's really skewed in one's favor. What I remember, it was 2016 when I made the donation. The criteria that I remember were I think it was just the blood type as far as matching goes. And then potential concerns were obviously overall health, being at least somewhat normal weight, not being a heavy drinker, probably not being a smoker. There were psychological tests, and just one by one until it got close. I do remember the day going for some blood work, and we've all been for blood work before, and they might take about 3-4 vials of blood. I think there were 17, and just watching him go in this little spinner thing. So it is it's an involved and careful process leading up to the donation. And I will say that for me, the surgery itself went very, very smoothly. There's, some pain afterwards, but, the biggest incision is smaller than one for a cesarean section, if anybody has had one or knows somebody who has. And I think I can't remember how much time I took off of work, but, after the first week, I was definitely feeling very good. The day of the surgery, the nurse came into my room and said, both of your kidneys are working great. And they're, I've had zero adverse effects. So that's kind of some of the nuts and bolts of it from my side of things. I will also say, though, that for me, 2016 was a really difficult year in some significant ways, and not looking back very far at all, making the donation was the very best thing that happened to me. Reverend Dee this morning in her sermon was talking about how we as Christians discern, what is God's will for us? What are we to do? And so often there is very little clarity about that. And, we can, on the other hand, ourselves, into paralysis, really. And there's really no downside to this whatsoever. It's 100% to the good. I have a new friend for life, and I'm completely healthy. If you have any thought to considering making yourself available, I would encourage you to do so. Just one thing I will add that I neglected earlier. I was in my mid-50s at the time of the donation, and that's I was told that was the ideal age range. Not that a younger person can't or shouldn't, and not that a somewhat older person can't or shouldn't, but we all know that with age, surgical risk increases. And they said, if a younger person, there's less clarity about whether they might in fact develop some kidney problems, or not ultimately have been a good candidate to donate. But middle age is the kind of the sweet spot.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. And we'll come back with, if people have questions for Rebecca, after we hear from Mike and Norma.
Hi, everyone. I'm Norma Olson Bartley, and I had a kidney transplant in July of 2020. It was scheduled back in March, but because of the pandemic, it was shut down, and we just had to find a new match for myself and all. But Michael was my donor, and with my story, I have polycystic kidneys. It's PKD. It's a genetic disease that my father had. My sister had. Unfortunately, she died at the age of 24 before her kidneys even failed. And my brother as well had polycystic kidneys, where he was on dialysis for over 14 years. There were a few attempts at getting him a kidney where he never came with a live donor, but was called one time where he was well enough to for the transplant, although the kidney donation was a conjoined kidney, and they just don't transplant conjoined kidneys, and they didn't realize that until they took it out of that person's body. Since that time, he had gotten too sick to have a kidney, and unfortunately, he died in May of last year. But with my story, I let's see, went on dialysis in April 2018. My kidneys had reached the end stage of renal failure. I went to the emergency room and I was put on dialysis right away, even though I did know I had polycystic kidneys. Like, as you had mentioned, Jackie, it's one of those things where it's like, no, I just have a bad cold. I'm not feeling well. And for months and months, I just wasn't feeling well. My breathing was heavy. I couldn't do a whole lot of stuff. And eventually I got to our spring break for school and said to Michael, I need to go to the doctor. And he said, make an appointment. And I said, no, now. So we went to the emergency room, and that was the start of dialysis. Michael's been my biggest advocate. It was, so I got on in April of 2018. By July 2018, we walked into the Yale Transplant Center with the encouragement of Michael, and he was determined for me to get on that list as soon as possible. I teach kindergarten, and many of my friends and colleagues from school, well, I shouldn't say many, but a handful of people at school came forward and said they would get tested. Michael was the first one to say he'd be tested on my behalf. Some friends and family members too, and some got tested. Some were matches, and some did not. But Michael and I were a match based on our blood. And what stopped him from being a perfect match for me was they actually mix our blood for a time, and because we've had children together, my antibodies were fighting his antibodies. Is that how?
Yeah, I guess through the pregnancy, there's hormones that develop in the woman that oftentimes create this sort of mismatch between husband and wife, and that's what happened with us.
That's the only place we disagree. No. Anyhow, he was good enough to plan on donating to somebody so that I could get a kidney. If I could also mention, there was a past student that I had whose mother had gone to Yale for testing before I even knew it, and she came forward and oh my, it makes me cry, because people are so giving and generous, and so she was a match. There were a few things that happened where she was ruled out, but she was fighting for it like a relative would, where sometimes if a person isn't a match, they might not go forward and give a kidney to someone else so that you could get one, but she was really fighting for it. Let's see, it was probably from July to Thanksgiving that I finally got on the transplant list, and an operation transplant was scheduled for maybe like there were 3 different times or so that a transplant operation was scheduled where it just didn't happen for one reason or another. And finally in July of 2020, it happened, and I'm doing well. I'm back to teaching and feeling wonderful. So that's my part of the story. Michael, if you want to mention.
Just sort of from the donor side. So for me, my journey was sort of similar to Pastor Rebecca's. I think it was very long. And as she mentioned, there's like an unbelievable amount of testing that occurs. And the folks at Yale, where we went through, would say that this is the most comprehensive physical examination that you could ever get. Like if your insurance company had to pay for this, I can't imagine what the cost would be, because there was so much blood work, as Pastor Rebecca had mentioned, scans, EKGs, that and it's all on behalf of the donor. Like she said, they're looking out for the well-being of the donor, and there are separate teams of doctors, one that looks out for the donor and one that looks out for the transplant recipient. And so, they each have their patient's best interests at heart. And as she had mentioned, it's exactly what she said. If I had decided that I wanted to pull the plug on donation the very morning of the surgery, that would have been okay, and they would have come up with an excuse. But it was really a 2-year journey for me. There were a bunch of false starts and stops with the donation, because at different points there were issues with my blood sugar and my blood pressure. And I would get one of them in order, whether it was through medication or diet or exercise. And then the other one would be slightly out of whack, and it would give them pause. And so they're looking to get all the planets in alignment at the same time, where they can say this guy is healthy enough to be a donor. And they're looking at your body mass index and everything, and making sure that everything's functioning as it should, so that you're not in jeopardy after you donate. And finally, as Norma had mentioned, we We were scheduled for March of 2020, and then COVID hit. And then finally, we were the first living donation surgery at Yale after COVID ended, because Yale was characterizing organ donations as elective surgeries during COVID in order to free up the beds that they needed to serve COVID patients. So they looked at it as dialysis was sort of an alternative to the surgery to keep you alive. So finally in July, they ended that, and we were the first surgery. After donation, I think I walked probably, they had said to me that walking is the key to recovery, to a speedy recovery. And so that's what I did. I think I walked 1.5 miles around our neighborhood the day after I got home. And I think I came home on a Tuesday. I think on Friday, I walked 1.5 miles 3 different times that day, so almost 5 miles on 3 days after the surgery. And I just kept walking and walking and walking every single day, like morning, noon, and night. And I was out of work for 6 weeks. Some people are out 2 to 4 weeks. I had plenty of sick time in the bank, and the doctor said, you might as well take the whole 6 weeks. So that's what I did. So by the time I went back to work, I have an office job, and I was more than ready to go back. I could have gone back to work a few weeks earlier. And maybe the one thing I would say about the donation process that I'd want to emphasize is that when you think about organ donors and transplant recipients, a lot of times people focus on this whole notion of, are we a match? And one of the things I learned from our process was the match thing really is not a big deal, because, in our case, because Norma and I were not a match, but I was willing to donate, we went through this thing called the NKR, the National Kidney Registry, and they basically take responsibility for making the match for you. So the whole key is, so if you need a transplant, the key, I think, is telling people that they don't have to worry about being matched. They just have to be willing to give, and the hospital will take care of the rest. Because initially you have reservations about, geez, I'm going to give the kidney to a stranger. I might never meet this person. And once you wrap your head around the fact that, who cares? At the end of the day, the person that you love or that you care about is going to get what they need. And you realize it's not about yourself or your own personal little hangups. And once you get past that, when we got on the National Kidney Registry list on a Monday, by Thursday, 3 days later, they called us and said, we think we have a match for both you and for Norma. So that part happened like super quickly. So that's one of the key things, I think, as potential transplant recipients talk to potential donors, is reassuring those friends, neighbors, and coworkers, don't worry about being a match. The hospital will take care of that. I just need you to be willing to give.
Wow, thank you. And just to clarify, I know I heard a little bit at the beginning. So you gave to somebody else, and somebody else gave to somebody else who gave to Norma. It was like a chain reaction type thing, right?
Yeah, it was a very small one. The woman who ended up receiving my kidney was a woman from Westerly, Rhode Island, who is actually the same age as our oldest daughter, Caitlin. And so she was the recipient of my kidney. And Norma's kidney actually came from someone in Colorado. It's what they call a paired exchange.
Thank you, Rebecca, Norma, and Mike, for sharing your stories. Are there any kind of questions or I'm just filled with gratitude. And Norma, first I just want to say sorry about your brother. I can't imagine the difficulty of you finding a kidney and getting healed and watching him not be able to.
That was a big thing where I get all choked up even talking about it. When my brother had been in the hospital or in some sort of medical facility for 174 days, he ended up at Yale. He left the hospital the day before Michael and I went into the hospital, and he came home in an ambulance because he was so bedridden. And Michael ended up Michael was in his room that he had been in for so long. So, it was extra hard having that kidney, being in pretty good shape, getting a kidney and seeing my brother so sick, where I wish I could have said, hey, give him the kidney first and I'll get mine later. But yeah, and that just is an example of why it's so urgent that you get the kidney sooner than later. Just a few things happen and my brother just never got his. So the sooner the better, for sure.
So I have a question. So Rebecca, was you donated directly to the recipient?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that they had that kind of chain reaction thing. That's really okay.
Yeah, I think that the average number of people in the chain is like 4 to 6 or something like that. But there was actually very recently a story on NPR about one that involved double digits. It was quite remarkable.
Yeah, Yale had actually done one before ours, a chain that involved, I think it was 17
Yeah.
different, like all middle-aged couples that had sort of swapped their kidneys with each other's spouses. But there was a picture that Yale had of all these couples lined up shoulder to shoulder. So you figure there were, probably like, I guess, like 34 people standing shoulder to shoulder. And they just talked about the logistics of coordinating these kidneys going in a bunch of different directions. And this was only over the course of, like, I think it was over a week and a half or 2 weeks that they squeezed in all these surgeries back to back.
Yep. Jackie, go ahead.
It seems that Rebecca and Mike, you all seem to know exactly, actually not Rebecca, but I'm curious about how do you get the information as to who you're receiving the kidney from, or do you know? Yeah, I thought that was all confidential, but they tell you who's involved in the transplant?
Pastor Rebecca, do you want to go first?
She knows.
Oh,
Well, I
you
did
first.
know
All right.
She knew, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jackie. Yeah, so in my case, you're right. It is confidential. Absolutely. But what happened in my case was when I went for one of the checkups, there's checkups at 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years after donation. And when I went, I think it was for the 6-month checkup, the surgeon who had taken my kidney out said, the woman who received your kidney would like to reach out to you. Are you comfortable with that? And I said, absolutely. I would love to find out who it was. At that point, I did not know. And so he passed my contact information along to her and her mom. And they had sent me a bunch of beautiful notes and letters of gratitude. And then from there, we had arranged a Zoom call that happened about a week before Christmas with her and her mother and Norma and I and our 2 daughters. So our families could meet each other, and we sort of clicked immediately. And last summer we went to Westerly, Rhode Island, and met them at their house and had lunch and had a nice visit one afternoon in August. So, but you're right, it is confidential, and it's both parties have to be willing to want to connect. Like if I had said, I don't want to meet the recipient, then the conversation ends there.
Thank you.
Sure.
All
I
right.
will say, I although mine was a directed donation, meaning that I knew who the recipient would be and so on, I really didn't know him. But we elected to meet beforehand. And I remember he and his daughter came to our house, and I had stepped outside to greet them. And he just embraced me and was crying. And you talked about not being a salesperson and the difficulty of making the ask. And I remember just feeling overwhelmed by that because I just hadn't been really thinking about what it would be like to be the person seeking the donation. And like Mike and Norma, our families did meet after the fact as well. And it's just really lovely.
Thank you.
AJ, I want to give you some time to, dispel myths about organ donation and share other information that you might like to share with us.
Sure. Just a quick question. Am I able to share my screen?
I can give you that ability in just a moment.
Sure, because I will need that ability in just a few moments. Thank you.
Okay, so I made you co-host, so you should have the ability to share.
Awesome. I'm honored. Hello, everyone. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who shared their story. Jack, Rebecca, Mike, and I'm sorry, what was your name, Mrs. Bartley?
Yeah. Oh, can you?
Norma.
Norma. Yeah, sorry.
Norma.
I had to unmute. Norma. Thank you. I know it.
So yeah, my story actually, I'll briefly go through my story and share the information that I have for you all. So my story begins in 2012. I was a sophomore in college. I went to the University of New Haven, and after leaving high school, I was, I made the tough decision to leave behind a lot of extracurricular activities and events. So when I got to college, I wasn't, there was no student government, no music or music honor society. I didn't join the special needs program that they had there. I really just wanted to focus on my academics and my health. And, after, not with leaving sports behind, I was missing that physical aspect. So it wasn't long until I found a passion for weightlifting and training and just having that time to myself. And I was consistent with that throughout college, but my sophomore year, 2012, is when I noticed something was wrong. And when I went out for a regular jog in my neighborhood, as soon as I passed my mailbox and began to pick up pace, I began to feel like my lungs had turned into sponges. So I was breathing, but it didn't feel like I was capturing the air that I needed. So I really just stopped right there and called my doctor and told him what was going on. And he eventually referred me to a cardiologist and told me that I had what was called a viral myocarditis at the time. And with being in college, everyone gets sick. I do recall getting sick quite a few times that the semester prior. So I was given a couple of medications to take, and I told myself this is the worst it was going to get, because I don't see someone like myself who is young and taking care of their health to need or to even have an anomaly with their heart. Fast forward, I was able to graduate college, and I'm very thankful for that, because shortly after graduating was when I began to succumb to the disease. And with that, I began to slow down. So there was no more gym. My part-time job at a sports goods store was, I had to put that on hold, because I remember hearing in some of your stories even saying that the simplest things became such a chore. Not even being able to walk, not even on an incline, just walking and standing, your body, it feels like your body's trying to, run a marathon. It's very confusing and very eye-opening, because you now realize the things that you've taken for granted, and you really give so much appreciation, respect to your body, because it does so much work to keep you happy. So I was, fast forwarding through that, I became very, very, very sick. I was in and out of the doctor's office. I had to be implanted with a pacemaker or implantable cardioverter defibrillator. And eventually I was in end stage heart failure and was admitted to wait for a heart transplant. And hearing that news for me was like, for some, I would imagine it would be scary news, but for me, I was sick for several years and wanted it to be over. That hearing heart transplant was like music to my ears. I was very, I said, let's just bring me into the OR and let's get this done. And that was before I understood the waiting list and the workup, like some of you mentioned. Mike, I think you even mentioned that the workup needed to become a donor is really, with the way you're explaining it, it's right next to what it's like to become a recipient, to be added to the wait list. It took 2 weeks before I was even put on the list. They look you up from head to toe to make sure you'll even survive the surgery and then after. So that's where I realized that after going through this testing, at some point going through all that testing, I realized that I wasn't going to the gym every day in college to look good or to impress myself or anyone else. I was really preparing myself for a much, much larger battle. I was told so many times that, if you were to succumb to all that college has to offer, on the partying side, partying and doing what you want, eating what you want, I was told I may not have favored as well. So I really took that with me. And even while waiting for a heart transplant, I was in Hartford Hospital for 4 months. I did not receive my transplant in the hospital. My condition continued to deteriorate, and I actually had to be implanted with what's called an LVAD, or a left ventricular assist device, which is a device that will actually pump my heart for me, but by the grace of a computer and 2 batteries that I have to carry along with me. I actually don't have the equipment here, but I do have a little trophy here that kind of shows exactly what that pump looks like. For anyone familiar with cars, it's like a turbocharger, and that was directly connected to the bottom left side of my heart. And so after that surgery, I was living by the grace of a machine for exactly 1 year and 1 month. But that's when I began to advocate, tell my story, because I was able to leave the hospital. And I really wanted to create my own silver lining. Although I was living by the grace of the machine, it was up to me to, do what I could with that. And I already had a big boost from being able to leave the hospital. So it was after 1 year and 1 month, I received a phone call. They asked me, how are you feeling today? And are you feeling on top of the world? And I asked, why would that be a question the hospital asked me? And they said, well, we've found a heart for you. And it was a very good day. It happened to be very sunny that day. And, I let my family know, and eventually there was a time for me to get to the hospital. So I did. And I made it to the hospital and received my heart transplant. And since then, just, again, like you, or I think it was, Mike, I think it was you that said that you were walking a bunch. I keep going back to you. I feel, we have a lot in common.
Right. Yeah, that was me. Yeah, I exercised as much as I could prior to the donation, and then afterwards walked like crazy afterwards.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was as eager as I was to get back in the gym and start lifting. I literally had to relearn to walk. Starting with maybe a day or so after my surgery. My nurses were probably the most toughest personal trainers I've ever had, because they wanted me out of that bed and walking around the unit. And I really felt like I couldn't, but they got me up. That was the support that I needed. And they had me walk, even if it was a few feet, it was something. And, just like you, Mike, I've never actually taken time to go on walks. I was living more of I never just took the time to slow down. So I was up early in the morning, appreciating the crisp fall, autumn, and listening to music. And, this is when I realized I was going through a transition, and it was a humanizing moment. And, this is where, when people ask, well, so are you different after your surgery? Well, of course, you go through so much, and if you have the right people to support you, you're going to come out the other side, but definitely not the same person. If anything, you're going to come out better and stronger. And so I was, I came back, I was walking more and more each day. And eventually I got through cardiac rehab, and eventually I continued volunteering, and I met with someone from New England Donor Services and learned about the opportunities that they have there. And I signed up immediately. I even went back to community college at Tungus to become a medical assistant, because I didn't have a medical background, but I wanted to start a journey that would bring me closer to transplant patients and recipients. And it really turned out much better than I thought. Instead of completely changing my outlook, it was kind of like there was a path for me already. Just if I just put, some work into it, I found myself right where I want to be. And so real quick, I apologize for, such a lengthy story. I try to keep it short, but sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. I just wanted to share with everyone just a few statistics and some myths that we can dispel. So just a recap of my story, here's me in the hospital. Actually, I'll start from the current slide. This is me in the hospital here doing push-ups when they told me not to. So eventually I had to stop. But really that's a testament to not wanting to lose that part of myself going through all this. This is me with the LVAD when training. As you see, the cord comes out of my lower abdomen and goes to a book bag you can't really see, but that was powering my heart. This is me after waking up from my heart transplant surgery. And this is me actually meeting my donor mom, who's able to see everything that I'm doing, or rather she's able to see everything that her son is doing, because her son lives on through me. And I'm so proud to be able to have a job where I continue trying to save lives, do my part in saving lives by the very same thing that saved mine. And I actually want to share with you real quick, actually, that moment was actually captured on film. And yeah, that will just load for us. So this is, she's listening to her son's heart. Thank you. And just a brief moment for her to, that was the first time she spoke to her son since his passing, and that was actually 3 years to the day of my transplant is when we met for the first time. So onto the educational piece. You've heard my story, and just to briefly reiterate and rather hopefully motivate and inspire, one person can save up to 8 lives through donating their organs, and enhance up to 75 lives through tissue donation. A story I hear all the time is someone who's been, usually soccer players, really, someone who's had an ACL surgery or knee surgery that tendon came from a donor. And of course, I'm not sure if anybody's as active on social media as I am, but there are so many videos online of people who received those special glasses for people who are colorblind to now see color. And you get to see their reactions. A lot of people break down and cry. Now imagine someone who received a return to sight. One of our coordinators told me about a story of someone who received corneas, and before, their life was like looking through 4 sheets of wax paper, if you can imagine that. And now it's once they've healed, it's 2020. Just to give you what we're capable of doing. So yeah, that's just to give you just a sliver of what some of the information regarding what one person can do through organ and tissue donation. Here in nationally, in 2020, there were over 39,000 transplants performed in the United States. Last year in 2021, I'm sorry, that was out of order, but currently to this day, there are 106,181 people waiting for a life-saving transplant, and that's just organs. But so, if you really compare this number, let's say 110,000 to 300 million people in the US, that doesn't really, some people have even brought up, as big as a number and as much as I want to help, that doesn't really seem like there's a need for transplants. And I'm like, well, what's not being considered is these are people who have made it onto the waiting list. So imagine the people who are living with diseases that could possibly be solved by organ transplant, but they are so sick that they can't be added to the list. If we were to include everyone who could benefit from a tissue or organ transplant, that number would easily be in the millions. So hopefully there will be a day where there is no waiting list and we can provide organ and tissue donation to anyone who needs it. And with that, there are 20 people who pass away every day while waiting. But in 2021, and despite the problems and all the tragedies we've had with COVID, we've continued to increase the number of transplants, showing that the operating organ procurement organizations around the world are still beating their records year by year, regardless of pandemic. This part isn't really necessary. Oh, excuse me. Oh no, sorry. I believe there was a link on that image and it now wants me to use it. Sorry about that, everyone. So now we're going to just go through a few myths. So I have a medical condition, so I can't be a donor. Really, this is, no, this is at the time of death, someone will be looked up and down like me when I was waiting for a heart transplant. Healthcare providers will look at everything, your medical and social history, to make sure that either you are will survive the surgery or you are a candidate for living donation. And then I'll quickly go to the next myth because I think the first and second myth actually are the same. I'm too old to be a donor. Now, the oldest person who's ever donated an organ was 94 years old. So personally, I don't think there is an age limit. There definitely isn't an age limit to register. But these two myths, I'm too old to be a donor or I have a medical condition, I just say, don't ever sell yourself short. Organ donation or not, you should never sell yourself short from helping someone. If you've held a door open for someone, you are that kind of person. If you've allowed someone to lean on you at a time, when they needed it, or you listen to someone, you are that kind of person. So never sell yourself short when it comes to helping someone. And no, this is not me trying to trick you into registering. Becoming a registered organ donor, it does require some thought, and we do encourage everyone to have that conversation with their friends and family. I'm just going through these quickly for the sake of time. Let's see. One that's more relevant today, people in the LGBTQ plus community can't donate. And again, there's no federal policy or regulation that excludes members of LGBTQ plus from donating their organs. It's really the health of the organs that matters. And now more than ever, with a community that's faced a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Segregation and really being not welcomed in many parts of our country. This is easily thrown into the myth. This myth is easily thrown into the mix, and it's really my job to demystify it. And that being said, an organ can come from anyone. Even during his presidency, Barack Obama signed into effect what's called the HOPE Act, which allows for the legal donation and transplantation of HIV positive organs to other HIV positive recipients who are in need. And an organ transplantation could be the cure that they desperately need, since HIV can end in end-stage multi-organ failure. So really, that's all I wanted to share. And also a story that really, one of my favorite stories is about Zion and his mother, Patty Ray. Zion was born with at a very, very young age of 2, Zion had a blood infection that not only required the amputation of his arms and his legs, but put him into kidney failure. And his mother, Patty Ray, was actually the one that donated her kidney to her son. That allowed Zion to grow up and if you notice something about Zion's hands, you'll notice the scars in his hands. Zion was actually one of the early recipients of a bilateral arm transplant from another, I believe, a little girl or a little boy who was just around the same age as him. And the most amazing part about this is that Zion, they were able to transplant the growth plate, so his hands and arms will grow with him through life. So yes, and if you do wish to register as an organ donor, if you do have an iPhone, you can register your decision by opening your health app and registering there. Or if you want to go to the DMV or the AAA and wait in line for a long time, that's fine too. But if you do find yourselves in those areas, you can register there as well. But of course, if you have access to the internet, you can visit registerme.org and you can learn more, hear more stories like we are doing today. And about everything. I want to thank you all for allowing me to share my piece and also share my story. And I want to thank all of you for not only letting me be here, but for sharing your stories as well. This is something that I'll definitely pass on to our organization. And Jackie, I gotta say that you were very brave for doing what you were doing. Even before I knew anything about organ donation, I can recall many instances in my life where I've seen people driving around in a car that would have painted on the back windshield putting out their phone number, asking, with the blood types, asking for an organ from their loved one. So yes, you are absolutely right when it comes to having that mental block of being able to share your problems and share and ask for help. I personally was like that when I first had my diagnosis. They gave me a couple pills, and I was very ahead of myself. I said, oh, I'm young, I'm active, and I'm healthy. And if I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit non-compliant in what I was told not to do. So, there's no shame in that. It's never something that people transition into or out of very easily. It's always going to be rocky, but I think you're well on your way. And if there's anything you need from us at New England Donor Services, just let us know and we'll do what we can. So thank you, and thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew, for both sharing your story and then also with information. Are there any questions that folks have that they want to raise? I mean, I have one that I would love to hear I saw you kind of went through this slide, but whenever I've mentioned organ donation to my parents or to friends, they're like, don't you know if they know you're an organ donor, they'll let you die in the hospital, or if you're in a coma, they'll just let you die. I'm like, that's not true. But do you have any kind of good, beyond just saying that's not true, to tell people
that myth? Because I'm actually happy to say that I think that, it's been a collective effort that I think that the information is getting out there. And even when I would show that myth, I would get some chuckles because people know that's not true. It just doesn't make sense. And if you end up ever having this conversation with somebody, and this happens to be a very popular myth, if someone says, no, they'll just take your orders, they'll look at your license. No, they have to, first of all, they have to call us first to inform us that there is somebody with a non-recoverable injury who is also ventilated and currently perfused in the ICU. So anyone who says, oh, they'll just take your organ, if they let you pass away at the scene of it, if they let someone pass away at the scene of an incident, their organs can't be used. So it kind of nips the myth in the bud right there. If because they need to have you stabilized, they need to contact the family. And of course, that's that piece with social information. Contacting the family is a big part of that. Not only do they need to let them know what's happening, but they need to know, what kind of lifestyle did they lead, and from there they can continue with the process. So I appreciate you actually bringing that up, because I was just gonna kind of speed through it. But yeah, very, very popular and incorrect myth.
Kathy?
This may have already been covered. So if I volunteer or make myself available and it turns out I'm not a match for Jackie, how does that help her get her kidney? I'm missing the link on that for that chain thing.
I can take a stab at that. So for instance, if you're a friend of Jackie's and Jackie goes to the hospital and says, I have a friend who's willing to donate, then the hospital will find a recipient for you. And in turn, they will find another giver that is a match for Jackie. So it wouldn't matter if you and Jackie were a direct match or not. The hospital takes care of the matchmaking piece.
Okay, and the more people that say, like if I encourage my siblings or anybody I can put my hands on to say, I'm willing to donate for Jackie, can we increase her chances? How does that?
So really, you just need one donor who the hospital deems eligible to give. The idea of having more in terms of like AJ was talking about, people that put the signs on the windows and so forth of their cars. I mean, the more people that you have sort of going to bat for you and willing and that are willing to be tested, the more likely that the hospital will find someone who meets the criteria to give. But it only takes that you only have to have that one person as the person searching for, let's say, a kidney. You only have to have that one friend or relative who is deemed eligible to give, and you're off to the races. But just in case, like, let's say you were found to be not eligible for some medical reason, if there are other friends who are willing to donate or other family members, that just increases the chances that one of you will be considered fit enough to donate.
And if I could mention, it's greater the joy and the blessing. Here, Michael helped me get a kidney because he came forward for me. And his kidney went to another person. So he's helping. The joy is greater because he's helping two people.
All right, go ahead, Roy.
So it really doesn't matter to know what blood type Jackie is, because the idea is if we donate, either way, if we're a blood match or a physical match, she benefits. And if we're not, it cues them in to find her a match.
That's right. I think the big advantage of that direct match, I think that everybody's always talking about, is it sort of expedites the surgery a little bit. Like, for instance, if Norma and I had been a match, when I was getting tested and I said, well, if we are a match, what's the timeline for her getting my kidney? And I think they were talking about maybe 3 or 4 weeks. It's really just a matter of like getting things in order on your own end, working it out with your employer, letting them know you're going to be out of work for several weeks and all that stuff. With the chain or the National Kidney Registry, where they are the ones that find the matches for you, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But I think when I first asked, I think they thought it could be like as long as 6 months. But as I had mentioned earlier, it was really only from Monday to Thursday of the same week for them to find that match for us. So that direct match maybe expedites things a little bit, but in some cases, not really all that much, like in our case.
Thank you.
Sure.
One thing I would just like to add is that in some of the slides that AJ showed us, talked about really the wonderful amount of good that can come if we are organ donors. That at the time of our deaths, there may be any number of people who can benefit. The advantage to being a live donor is that the useful life of that organ is generally quite a bit longer than from a cadaver. So it's obviously if the recipient's best chance is to get a cadaver organ, then of course you would go for that. But to receive a live donation is even better.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here and your attentiveness. And I do want to close us out in prayer. Before I do, just reminding us that even if organ donation is not something you discern as a part of what God is calling you into, blood donation is also a very valuable way of giving life. That's something that's a lot lower of a bar. And so we are in the process. If folks, Lily Miller is interested in hosting a blood drive here. The American Red Cross apparently does a lot of the organizational work. They just need a few volunteers on the ground at the location. And so if you're willing or interested in working with Lily on being kind of a team of folks to put together a blood drive here, something that we would certainly like to have happen. And just reminding us that, even if giving blood is something you can do, then to consider that as well. That's a much lower bar and that still has a very life-saving impact, particularly now the Red Cross is at a really low level. And so even giving blood is a life-giving gift.
And Reverend Littlepage, sorry to interrupt. If there's anything that you would like to or need from us, we'd love to partner with you in any way, provide any information, literature, and even get some of our volunteers on the ground with your community as well, if for any reason at all.
Okay, awesome, great. So let us pray. This is a prayer I found online, so I didn't write this myself. So I don't have a source for it. It was just online, an organ donation site. So let us pray. Creator God, breath of life, through medical science, you have given us the skill and ability to transplant organs, renewing life for the critically ill. Bless Jackie, who awaits the gift of a kidney to enhance the quality of her life. Release her from any pain she may be in. Lord, we give you thanks for all those who have considered and are considering being a donor for Jackie. We also give thanks for the witness of Rebecca and of Mike, who have given the gift of organ donation. We ask that their story of generosity may be an inspiration to us all as we consider the ways that we might use our life to benefit others. Lord, we pray for all of those who are on organ donation list. We pray for their families and their friends and those who care for them. In your holy name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. And thank you, Rebecca, for inviting Mike and Norma and for you all jumping in and sharing your story.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Good to reconnect with you
Thank
too.
you for doing this. This was very informative.
Jackie, I would just add, I'd be more than happy to answer questions for anybody who, is thinking about it, but has, just wants some.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that, Rebecca.
And thank you, Martha, for inviting Rebecca to share her story. I've seen you a couple times. I didn't know your story. So thank you, Rebecca, for sharing it, and Martha for inviting her to share it.
Peace. Happy Sunday.
And thank you to Mike
Have a
and
good
Norma
Sunday,
so much
everybody.
for sharing your story. Bye-bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.